will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McCraeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765.
Get a refreshing change of your expectations of a sports bar and restaurant at the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. Matt Llewellyn's welcoming spot at Clinton Parkway and Cassold covers all the bases, like their own handcrafted beers and all the televisions you need for great sports viewing. But it's the large, varied, and delicious menu that stands apart. From a favorite of mine like the awesome ahi tuna appetizer to great sandwiches, outstanding pizza, and truly fantastic entrees, the 23rd Street Brewery has it all. Matt and his friendly staff make it that much more enjoyable. Food until 10, fun until late. The 23rd Street Brewery is a can't-miss stop when you are in Lawrence. We're back on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing on the Reasonably Irreverent podcast with Jeff Montgomery, Royals Hall of Famer. What was it? I've talked to you about this before, but for the purposes of the profile, tell us about your Major League debut and how it came about.
Yeah, I was in Des Moines, Iowa. I was playing for the Nashville Sounds against the Iowa Cubs, and my manager's name was Jack Lind. And after that game, in late July of 1987, he calls me in the office and asks me what I'm going to be. He said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "What do you mean? We got a game?" He said, "Well, we do have a game." He goes, "But you're going to be in Cincinnati." And I'd been called up to pitch in a couple of exhibition games for the Reds, so they didn't have to use a pitcher,
right,
in like a charity game or whatever. And I thought maybe I was going up for one of those instances, but no, sure enough, that was my real call up, and I was just so excited. I remember going back to the hotel in downtown Des Moines, Iowa, and I couldn't sleep all night. I was afraid I'd oversleep. I had an early flight. But the night before, after that game, I had a teammate whose name was Max Venable.
Yeah.
And he had some major league time, and I asked Max, I said, "When I get to Cincinnati, how do I get to the ballpark?" He said, "Well, just take a cab. There'll be plenty of cabs at the airport." I said, "Well, how much it'll cost?" He said, "Probably $30 or $40, And I said, "Well, I got like $8, So I remember in the minor leagues, Tina and I had our first child, Ashley, at the time, and I'd get my meal money, and before I got on the plane, I'd give her half for diapers, and I'd take the other half for the road trip, and found ways to get by on about $6 or $8 a day.
Wow.
So, but anyway, Max loaned me $50. So when I get to Cincinnati, I can get to the ballpark. But I get to the ballpark, and it's just spectacular because I'd watched a number of games at Riverfront Stadium growing up as a kid.
Right.
And but it was just an unbelievable thrill when you put on that Major League uniform for the first time. You walk up the tunnel to the dugout, and you walk out on that field, and no longer are you out looking at guys like Johnny Bench and Pete Rose and Joe Morgan. You're now one of the guys in uniform and your teammates, and you're now a major leaguer. So it was just probably one of the most memorable experience that I can think back to that still just gives me chill bumps when I think about it.
How did those back in the day, sometimes the rookies were supposed to be, not seen, not heard, whatever. How did a group of superstars basically treat a young guy?
They were good. The only thing I remember that they were not so good about is I had a routine every day of running at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd go out on a warning track and just run my foul pole to foul pole, foul pole to foul pole. I'd do that for about half an hour. And, I remember a couple of veteran pitchers came up to me and said, "Look, you're really kind of making us look bad. Why don't you cut it out?" So I stopped my running, and I'd occasionally do it, like before I went to the ballpark. But then I found my performance was lacking a little bit, and I could attribute it to not running. So I started running again, regardless of what they were thinking, and
right.
Got back on track. But yeah, they treated me great. I mean, I had some great teammates: Terry Francona, Buddy Bell, and Pete Rose was my manager. So it was really spectacular to have those type guys around and learn from guys that I could tell that Buddy Bell and that Terry Francona had the kind of characteristics that would lead to being good managers. And sure enough, Terry's still managing, and Buddy Bell had the opportunity to manage as well.
Then the off season comes. It's your boyhood team. You've made the majors. You performed fairly well. You had that thrill, and then you get traded. And it's not like he got traded for some kind of a big star or something either. Van Snyder, who would go on to play 19 games in the major leagues. That must have been pretty jarring. We've talked about all the things that have been smooth and, fortuitous for you, but the first slap in the face as a professional, that must have been tough.
It was actually welcome.
Really?
When I got the phone call, because I'd been up for about 2 to 3 months in '87, and I didn't feel like I had performed anywhere near my capability. I had a number of good games, but I also had some terrible games. So I didn't feel like I had a good chance of making the roster in the opening day.
So you felt like maybe you'd shown them the wrong side of your performance, perhaps?
I think like a lot of young players, you try to do things you're not capable of doing, and you get yourself in trouble, and you're trying to make pitches you don't have the ability to make. And anyway, I got away from my game a little bit, and I think I kind of left a bad impression with my manager, Pete Rose, and I didn't feel like I had a chance to make the club out of spring training. But when I got traded to the Royals. I get the phone call, and it was the Reds minor league director. His name was Chief Bender, and he said, "Hey, we're trading you. You just got traded to the Royals." But I'm thinking, I'm going to make this club. I felt really good because I'd never heard of Mark Gubicza. I'd never heard of Bud Black. I'd heard of Dan Quisenberry and Bo Jackson and George Brett and Brett Saberhagen. Those are about the only guys. I'd never heard of Frank White. So I'm going to this organization. I'm thinking, I got a great chance to make this team. I really got a great chance to make the team. And sure enough, I go to spring training about a week or two later. I got traded sometime like mid-February. I go to spring training, and one of the first people I met was the general manager, John Sherholtz. And he said, "Hey, we've looked at your numbers as a starter and a reliever. We think you're cut out to be a relief pitcher. So we're going to send you to Omaha and convert you back to a relief pitcher." So my bubble was burst in about my first 20 minutes as a Royal that I'm not going to make the club.
Right.
But I pitched really well in spring training camp, and it wasn't long after that early part of the season I pitched well in Omaha, and they were able to call me up, and I can't remember what it was, but sometime I think in late May of '88 I got called up, and I was fortunate to stick in the big leagues.
That was a star-studded team as well, with some big personalities and maybe a clubhouse that we wouldn't sort of think of Royal-like, maybe some guys who were a little too big for their britches or whatever, and then some guys who were obviously down to earth. What was that clubhouse like to come into?
The guys that really made me feel good and welcome, Steve Farr, Brett Saberhagen, Mark Gubicza, and George Brett. Those guys really were good to me. And especially George. It didn't matter if you're a pitcher or you're a position player. If you're a young player, he wants to make you feel at home. He wants to make you feel like you belong on the team. And he was really good. And I saw it over years. I think I played 6 years with George, and during those years, it was very similar with a lot of young players that would come up. He would do his best to make them feel welcome and at home. And it's one of the things that really rubbed off on players like Brett Saberhagen and Mark Gubicza, who lived with George when they were rookies. They kind of paid back the same thing to players like me when I came to the organization. But anyway, just made you feel at home and welcome and part of the team.
We're sitting in your lovely home now, but when you came to Kansas City, you were talking about you're a year removed from not having cab fare. So what was your initial introduction to Kansas City and as a family man?
Yeah, so I started the season in Omaha, and we went on a road trip for the College World Series, a long road trip. And during that time, my wife Tina and our daughter Ashley, they went back to West Virginia, which is where we were living in the off season, near Tina's mom and dad. So they were back home, and I get the phone call late one night that I'm being promoted to Kansas City. So I called Tina, and she basically said, I was expecting you to call, and she was expecting me to get called up because I was really pitching well. But we get here, and kind of same thing. A lot of the wives, were really open and helpful with Tina, getting us, set up and letting us know where we're a good place to rent, all those things. And one of those wives was Kathy McFarland, Mike McFarland's wife, and my wife Tina and Kathy are very good friends, and they talk almost every day still today. So,
right.
It was good. It was a place that when we first learned we got traded, Tina was not excited. She's like, I can't believe we're going to Kansas. And eventually, after a couple years of playing baseball here, we decided to make it our permanent home and raise our children here and send them to school here. And still here today. I don't think there's anything I could do to convince her to live anywhere else.
Where did you live when you first moved here?
We lived on College Boulevard at about Quivira.
Right.
So lived in that area. We rented, and I think there was another player or two that were renting in the same apartments.
What was the minimum salary when you started playing for the Royals?
I think it was around $52,000.
Okay.
I think it's what it was. It was around. It was a little. I think we went from $50,000 to $52,500 or something like that.
Right.
During my first year or so, but
so it's good. It was still good money for a guy who didn't have cab fare.
Yeah,
a year before.
I mean, I thought I was rich. I mean, making almost $10,000 a month to me was more than I made in the entire season. My 4 years in the minor league. So it was a big boost.
You quickly became a success with the Royals, too, as their fortunes would start to wane, although the first few years there would still always be high hopes for the Royals. 1 year as a setup man, and then you became a closer. First of all, what was it like for you to be told and to transition to being a relief pitcher? Was it something that you embraced?
Yeah, I was pretty excited about it, even though the year before when I was in Cincinnati, I was a starting pitcher in the minor leagues and was promoted as starting pitcher. I really felt like I was better as a relief pitcher. My arm responded real well to pitching back-to-back days. So I embraced the opportunity to become a relief pitcher. I would never have envisioned I'd become a closer, but I've learned, from playing now and looking back, I think every relief pitcher should aspire to be a closer because I think it elevates your position and I think it elevates your game because you have to. And that's why I was open to it. I was welcoming, that chance to become a relief pitcher again. I'm very fortunate at the time that I did get a chance to start closing some games.
You were the Rural Age relief man in 1993. You tied the club record for saves with 45. But as the few years were going on, the Royals were becoming less competitive. What was that like as a ball player? You, closers, especially good ones, they're pitching in wins almost every time, whereas the rest of the team is fighting it. What was that like?
Yeah, I think the first half of the career, really up through the strike of 94,
right,
/95, we had really good teams.
Right.
We'd win 90-plus games and not get in the postseason because there was only two divisions at the time. There were no wild cards, so you had to win your division to get in, and it was hard, especially when you had teams like the Oakland A's who were kind of superpower teams at that stage.
Right.
So, we were kind of in it up to the end, and I think 94 was probably maybe the best team I was on as a Royal, and I felt really confident we were going to do something that year postseason-wise, and then the strike hit, and obviously the postseason was canceled. But then really after the strike, that was when the organization...
I think you won, 14 games in a row headed into the strike?
Yeah, we won a bunch of games, and we were healthy. Everybody was clicking, and we were deep. Starting pitching was deep. Our bullpen was really good. Had a really solid, defensive team, and had some guys that hit the ball. So we were a complete team. I really felt good about our team, and probably one of the most disappointing stages of my career. When we unfortunately weren't able to finish that season and kind of see what we could have done. But, it was after the strike was over in 95, it seems like that's kind of when the organization started dismantling, cutting payroll and just kind of chopping things down. And unfortunately, Mr. Kaufman had passed away a few years earlier, and there wasn't an owner in place. So there was the foundation, I think, was kind of running the club, and there was a finite amount of dollars that they could use to bring players in. It just didn't work out very well.
No, it didn't. But you had that taste of being on a good ball club, but you were still a fine player and an all-star player, as the team wasn't that good. As a competitive guy who had won championships in the minor leagues, been on a Reds team that was just basically coming off and then entering another period of greatness, and then a really good team that just couldn't crack the playoffs. What was it like playing on losing teams?
Every day you go to the ballpark, and I don't care if you're 10 games out